Hey everyone, I'm Jean-Marc. I'm going to be reviewing the Sony WH-1000XM3, the third generation of Sony's noise cancelling series, which is a travel portable headphone that wants to compete with the likes of the Bose QC25 back in the day, the QC35 now, things like the Sennheiser Momentum Wireless. And this is Sony's latest iteration, which sort of builds upon the XM1, the XM2, to bring us this third generation. So let's first talk about what the headphone is. So it's an over-ear headphone. It's quite compact. It's quite lightweight. And it comes with a very nice, actually, cloth carry case that's actually hard-shelled. Most noise-cancelling headphones do come with something like this. It's the least you can expect, really. A single cable without a microphone because the microphone's built in, as well as an airplane adapter. And a USB-C charging cable. That's another new addition, the use of USB-C. Now, talking of the headphones themselves, as I said, they are quite lightweight. They are a bit plasticky as well, though things like the QC35 aren't any better. They all tend to have this. In terms of build quality, the best I've seen so far are things like the Master and Dynamic MW60s or the Sennheiser Momentums. But these are quite good. It's a nice type of plastic. It's matte, so it doesn't feel grimy or sticky or picks up fingerprints like some shiny pairs do. The pads as well, this seems like a memory foam. It's a very nice pad. The leather as well, this is protein leather on the headband and here. Again, seem quite pliable, quite malleable, and also quite long lasting, which is important if you're going to be using these on the train or when you have to walk around where you might be sweating a lot. Which leads me on to comfort. So the comfort of this pair on the third generation has been improved from the first and the second. They're slightly lighter and the cup design has been changed a bit. It's gone slightly deeper. So putting them on, it is genuinely a very, very comfortable pair of headphones. And I have pretty high standards for comfort. I've had a lot of portable pairs in the past that I've worn for hours on end and they've always formed some sort of hotspot on the top of my head. But because of the way the headband's designed here, where it's sort of not a complete oval, it's kind of like the Bose QC35's headband. It's actually very ergonomic. You don't get a hot spot at the top of your head, and there's a lot of padding here, which is really, really, really good stuff. And the nice thing is they also fold this way in as well, so if I'm wearing them around my neck like this, they're not very intrusive at all, and because they're lightweight and the way that they contour around my neck, they're pretty easy to forget about. So onto the performance. Well, I'll run through the feature list initially just to give you an idea of what these things can do. So they've got Bluetooth 4.0, not the latest Bluetooth. 5.0 is what usually comes standard, such as the AirPods, for instance. The latest generation has 5.0, though this shouldn't trouble too many people. It also has aptX, aptX HD, and LDAC, which is the high-res streaming formats. So if you're listening to lossless files, or anything over a certain bitrate, these will sound better than a standard typical Bluetooth headset without aptX, though that's been around for a while. Things like the Sennheiser Momentum have had that. And it also has different levels of noise cancelling. So you've got a standard noise cancelling on, then you've got an ambient room sound control thing where it actually lets in sound from the outside, which I thought was actually really, really cool. And it also has Google Assistant built in, so once they're connected via Bluetooth and you were to tap the ambient noise button, which might seem a bit confusing at first, if you actually click it, it'll actually open up Google Assistant, and the setup was very easy. So I had paired it up to my S9 Plus. Turning them on brings up a notification to say there's a Sony WH-1000XM3, do you want to connect to it? Takes you through the Google Assistant setup, and it's pretty smooth sailing from there. So that's a very convenient feature actually. But onto the most important thing for me, which is the real life performance with sound and noise cancelling. And I'll start off with the sound. So there is only a very small difference when using the headphones plugged in or with Bluetooth turned on without the wire, which is once you plug them into the wire and actually turn off all the active parts, the active amplification happening within the headphones, the sound does get a bit boxy, almost like that telephone effect, but it's so small and it's quite impressive because usually with other headphones, when you turn off the active parts, can sound much worse. For instance, the QC35 has that issue where once it does run out of battery, the sound does dramatically change. It doesn't do that on the XM3, which is great. I think that's very important. But when you do turn it on, the sound becomes slightly more focused, a little bit more powerful, and there's a little bit more bass. So this comparison is just, well, this sound review now will be for essentially the sound across the board with minor variation for the noise cancelling and noise cancelling off. Starting with the bass, there is a mid-bass hump, so there is good bass extension. There is definitely a decent amount of sub-bass, and the sub-bass and the bass are shelved up by about 3 or 4 dB. There clearly is a bass boost. And whilst this is good for public transport, where the bass kind of, gets drowned out by the noise around or when moving, I can imagine this getting ever so slightly overbearing once actually just sitting at a desk and just trying to enjoy something that's got a lot of acoustics or classical. The bass can be a bit strong, but it's a very fun headphone for EDM, pop, R&B, stuff like that. Moving on to the mids, there is a bit of a lower mid hump. It sort of falls up from the bass. So the upper bass and lower mids tend to sort of slowly dip down from the gradual rise, which carried on through the bass, which again is very good. It gives guitars a lot of body. It gives male vocals a lot of body from the tracks that I've tested these with. But then towards the mids and the upper mids, it just starts to dip. So vocals kind of take a step or two back even. Again, which is good because once you do turn them up, the upper mids tend to sometimes sound shrill on other headphones that have boosted mids, things like this Sennheiser AHG650. But with these, you can turn them up and they still sound very full-bodied, even though vocals aren't as upfront as they could be. And then they have sort of a bit of a dip towards a lower treble, sort of around 6 kilohertz, 7 kilohertz, which most consumer headphones do to stop harshness. So this is definitely not a harsh pair of headphones. And when you do crank them up, you don't get any of that sibilance or annoying treble peaks that you typically would get. Moving on to the mid treble and upper treble, they do have a nice amount of sparkle. It's not boosted by any means. It's sort of controlled, I would say. There's just enough excitement, so it doesn't sound too upfront, too sparkly, too sort of airy or metallic, but at the same time, it doesn't sound too closed in, which is good. I mean, it's definitely a step up from the earlier Sonys that have had a bit too much. Things like that 7 could be a bit too sharp up top. Or the 1AM2, which is Sony's latest revision of the 1A, which is the wired version of this, which could also have a bit too much treble. So this is definitely a very happy medium. I can definitely see myself getting along with this. And I mean, overall, I think the sound profile is very likable. It's very easy to listen to. It's very genre competent. So as I said before, things like R&B or modern EDM or pop, and if you're on a busy tube station or a train and you want to crank up the sound, it's great. And the noise cancelling is extraordinarily effective. This is hands down one of the best noise cancelling I've ever seen on any headphone whatsoever. So I've had experience with things like the QC25, the 35 not so much, but I've given them a good demo. And this is definitely a solid performer. You don't get any of that sort of cabin pressure effect that you can get with things like the QC35, where you put them on and you feel like there's a compression happening, which can give people headaches over long term. This definitely seems to have fixed that problem. And finally, they have something called an acoustic optimizer, which is when you click the button when they're plugged in and turned on, it plays a few test tones to essentially calibrate them to your ears, something like the Europhone did, except this is, well, less extreme basically. The changes are subtle, but it definitely sort of tamed things to my preferences, brought the bass down a tiny bit, brought the upper mids just a bit more forward. So yeah, overall a very, very solid sound performer, and I think something which any audiophile or consumer will be quite happy with for what they are and for what they're going for right now. A very good all-rounder for sure. So overall, would I recommend these, especially with the stiff competition from the QC35-2, which is out there right now? I mean, that is truly their only competition. There's the Sennheiser PXC550, but right now your choice is between this and the Bose essentially. And honestly, I really would. I mean, sure, the build isn't the most premium around there, but it's very good. The comfort is excellent. The noise cancelling performance is some of the best I've heard. And the sound signature, whilst not being the last word in analytical, is still very enjoyable. And it's definitely got enough clarity, depth, detail, and punch and fullness to suit a huge audience's needs. So definitely highly recommended. A great headphone overall. And well, one I'd like to use for my daily commutes from now on.